Good evening. August 2nd, a little bit after 8 p.m., and I'm sitting outside in this glorious weather. If you're hot and miserable, look at the temperature right now. A little after 8 on August 2nd. It is 60 degrees, 85% humidity. The evening of August 2nd, a little bit after 8 p.m., I'm up above 8,500 feet, a few miles outside of Cloudcroft, New Mexico, a state of the USA, relishing this beautiful evening. I have caregivers in mind right now, as if any of you all are taking care of an elderly parent full time who's sick, who has hospital visits and doctor's visits, and maybe even daily. Someday that will end. Your parent will be relieved of their suffering, and you'll be relieved of the burden. Today, August 2nd, is the 8th anniversary of my mother's passing. She passed at 6 o'clock in the evening, the dinner hour. I always thought that was funny. Dinner hour, so she ate her first meal in heaven. Jesus talks about banquets, doesn't he? It was a Sunday. Sunday at the dinner hour. She passed at age 84 years after a 3-year cancer fight. She had 2 different cancers. One was anal cancer, completely separate from lung cancer. The lung cancer was non-smokers' lung cancer, and it was a completely different type of cancer from the anal cancer. They were 2 separate cancers. It was not metastasis. The anal cancer they cured by removing her rectum, and she had to have a colostomy bag. But it was cured. It never did spread after that. The lung cancer, well, she had kidney disease very badly, and she could not take any chemo for that. So they did radiation treatment, and it put her into remission for quite a good while. And I would bring her up here to the mountains, and she did so much better up here, too. Of course, she had to be on oxygen, but when she was up here with that, but even with oxygen, she did so well. I guess they could have done, like, removed a lung, but she nearly died from the anal cancer surgery. She just really wasn't a surgery candidate. Mother had a lot of problems, and I was taking, all I can say is, for me personally, I am not going to fight tooth and nail to stay alive. If something like that were to happen to me, if I were to get cancer, I mean, I'm in my 60s now, and I'm widowed, and my attitude is, having seen what a cancer fight can be like, oh, it's everyone's personal decision. But for myself, I would go into hospice. I'd say, put me in hospice. I would not be fighting tooth and nail. My mother fought tooth and nail until the very last moment of consciousness. When she went in unconscious, I put her into hospice. I had her transferred out of the hospital and into hospice. And where we were was in El Paso, and the El Paso hospice, it's over on the west side. It's beautiful location and whatnot, and they were just wonderful. But Mother could have been in hospice before that. But no, she wasn't going to. She was fighting tooth and nail because the poor thing was brought up Southern Baptist, even though she left her Baptist faith when she was a young adult and a young woman married to her first husband. And they both became Episcopalian. And I was raised Episcopalian. And the Episcopalians don't talk about hellfire and damnation, but the Southern Baptists do. At least they did, because she was born in 1931. And the poor thing, she was just scared to death of going to hell. She fought. She even though she had faith and she had been a good woman, she was scared to death of going to hell because the Southern Baptists did that. You can't do that. My husband was raised fundamental Baptist. Texas has a lot of Baptists. My husband was raised fundamental Baptist, and his dad was a fundamental Baptist pastor who preached hell and hellfire and damnation. And it turned my husband off so much. He was so scared of God that he finally concluded when he was like 18, he decided there is no God. He met me, and he was not going to go to church any longer. He used to go to church 3 times a week. One time I overheard my mother and they got along really well before his brain injury. When he was himself, they got along marvelously. And they had a lot of things in common, which I did not have in common with them because, I wasn't raised Baptist. And Mother had hidden from me about how she felt. But I would overhear them. I'd be in the kitchen cooking, and I would overhear them in the den talking. And now Mother had total faith in God and everything, and Jesus, but she would say, "Well, I understand, honey, how you've lost your faith. I mean, it could be, you can have doubts when you're raised like that. But, I believe that God's a loving God." But that's what she would say. But she'd also talk about how she understood his doubts, blah, blah, blah. And he'd talk his talks. At any rate, despite being Episcopalian for a great majority of her adult life, and she served in the church, altar guild, Daughters of the King, all that stuff. And then later in her life, I told her, "This is my thing, Mother. You don't have to do this at all. This is just me." But she decided she'd go ahead and become Catholic when I did. So that was the last 6 years of her life. Despite all of that hellfire damnation preaching just came back and haunted her, and she fought tooth and nail not to die. Because she was scared to death that she would go to hell. That's just how you can't. My mother was, quite frankly, a genius. Really IQ genius, top in her class, college educated, incredibly smart, and very humble about it. She never made anyone feel dumb. And she became a teacher. My husband, also a genius, quite literally, IQ genius, incredibly smart. First, the only one in his family to go to an accredited university and then get his PhD. And he was a scientist. And these 2 super brains would sit around and talk, and I just listen because I'm not nearly as intelligent as either one of them. But I noticed something. You can't talk to intelligent children when they're young and impressionable and they're really intelligent. You cannot talk hellfire and damnation to them and expect them to love God or to want to have anything to do with God. You can't expect that. It turned them off, terrified them. For Mother, made her leave the Baptists. For Roy, he threw the baby out with the bathwater. Anyway, it's been 8 years that she's been in heaven, and that I've been relieved. It's of the caregiving duties. And if you're a caregiver out there taking care where it's like just constant, and it's a constant battle, and gosh, when they get cancer, and when they have dialysis with kidneys, and when they have all kinds of problems, there's a lot of medical issues with my mother. and you're having to do that because there is literally no time to do anything else, because all kinds of things happen, eventually you're going to be relieved, and then you can live your own life. And I think there's no better place to be than up here in the mountains. This is heaven. Heaven on earth. It is absolutely glorious. And thankfully, we're having a cloud-crofty day. It never got above 62 today. Never. Whereas down in the desert, it was in, like 100 degrees. Did you hear that? Did the camera pick that up? No, that sounds like a dog. I wonder if we have wolves. I don't know if the camera picked that up or not. Buddy, she's not a squirrel. All right, it's getting dark. I'm going to sit out here with tea. It's just glorious to be able to do your own thing, live your own life. That day will come for you eventually. And for those of you who are already relieved and you have the freedom to go wherever you want to, pay attention to the weather and what's happening. And the air pollution. My mother's lung cancer, the doctor said it was from El Paso's air pollution. She was in El Paso, and she was born in Fort Worth. I mean, but she lived in El Paso most of her life. And El Paso used to be beautiful, but it got terribly air polluted. And it doesn't take that long to be breathing in air polluted air to do significant damage to you that comes up later. You may not notice it now, but it will come to you later. And that's what happened with her. And it was such a shock because we don't have cancer in our family. Our family has high blood pressure and strokes, not cancer. But the doctor said they're seeing more and more people in that air polluted environment coming down with lung cancer who had never smoked, just like my mother. And they said that it seems to affect women more than men, though men do get non-smokers lung cancer as well. So wherever you're living, if you're having to breathe in air polluted air, if you're having to breathe in wildfire smoke, anything like that, get out of there. Oh, it's nice and wet around here. It's absolutely sopping wet. I'm going to go now. Have a good evening. Bye-bye from Cloudcroft.